Welcome back. We will start with a lecture by Krzysztof, President of PLENARY Foundation. And I would like to welcome warmly our on-site participants, but also those who are online. And afterwards, there will be time also for discussions. You can write them on the chat or just raise your hand. We'll give the voice and floor to you too. So, first is you.
Thank you for... Okay. Thank you for this invitation to share with you reflections on memory, which for myself, for the Borderland work, is one of the crucial component of our laboratory, our workshop. From very beginning, being here, we face the challenge to work with forgetfulness, oblivion, destruction of heritage, and the memory was at the very center of this work. And remembering our beginnings, our first meetings with David, with Nina, with Veronica, and our first workshops, I shared with you at that time, it was almost 3 or 4 years ago, the 3 ways, 3 names for the memory, which at that moment were crucial for me. I mean, the common memory, the critical memory, and the good memory. And I somehow figure out this concept in the discussion I had with 2 prominent historians, intellectuals, Saul Friedlander and Pierre Nora, which this encounter and the debate with them for me helped me to crystallize these ideas, because Saul Friedlander, as you probably know, for all his life, being a Jew living in the United States, but being the historian of the Holocaust, he was in the position of defending memory of his people against any kind of not only manipulation, but escape from responsibility, especially in Germany. And he's well known mainly of his books challenging German historians, describing the Holocaust as something specific, not rooted in a daily life of normal people, that it was, like an imposed ideology by the Nazi system. And the position of Saul Friedlander was that it was not only imposing, but it was also the part of the society, of the daily culture and ideology permitted this, and making people co-responsible for that guilt. And Pierre Nora, famous with his lieu de mémoire, places of memory, was a person who built this concept of building national identity, national, rather in broader terms of the French way of understanding it, in France, by designing the map of the places of memories and building upon them the narrative of who we are, in fact. And my position, and the Saul Friedlander, he is now more than 80 years old. Pierre Nora is 1 generation younger, and I was at least 2 or 3 generations younger than they. And that matters, I believe, because the role of my generation as we consider it from the very beginning, so starting in 1989, 1990s, is work in a New Poland, after 1989, was different, was not very much about defending, was not very much about building national identity on that, but it was rather about finding the way to take responsibility for the broader scope of land issues and culture than the narrow national identity or national memory could do. So finally, we find ourselves, Poles here, Lithuanians there, Czechs there, in Central Eastern Europe, in the position that there is no anymore empire, there is no anymore totalitarian ideology to be guilty for something and responsible for something. So like a scapegoat, we can delegate our responsibility to something external, but the life and the land was in our hands, the whole land. And so it means with all the multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious heritage. So it's a different position when you are finding yourself in the position of not only taking care, but being responsible for the whole, rather than what history would like you to, in a more narrow sense of this belonging. That's why borderland. Yeah, that's why not a borderline foundation with a strict division from one to another, but a land, common land, the country, the kraj, we would say in our Polish-Lithuanian tradition, kraj as something we share in common, despite the borders, despite the differences. Different people, different memories, different experiences, different religions living together in one society, in one town, in one region. How to deal with that? And the first answer was to develop, to build up on the critical memory. So first, the justful thing you can do to have any credibility to be the owner of the whole is to be self-critical. To start, if there was a guilt, there was something wrong in the past, okay, we understand it. Probably all are in that or another percentage responsible, but we start with ourselves, with our dark chapters of the history, yes? To breaking through this fear that, better not to touch it. Yeah? In Polish-Jewish relationships, in Polish-Lithuanian, in Polish-Ukrainian relationships, many things, which were in the position before, in the position of Soviets, of the rulers, yes? The army were the peacekeepers, in the brackets, yeah? That we will take care about your relationships because we know you are nationalist, and so on. And although as we know, they always fuel the conflicts. That was the way how to divide and to rule, yes, to fuel the conflicts. But it is in our hands in Moscow that we will solve these problems. Now it was in our hands, not even in European Union hands, because it's another escape you can have. Yeah, yesterday I saw the film by Agnieszka Holland about the Green Border, which is the very center of our Polish discussion today. But very often the reception of the film, about the bad treatment of the refugees on the border was the EU is responsible. Yeah. And of course, partly it is true. Partly it is true. But what about us? Again, we are in the situation and somebody else is responsible for that, what's going on our border. So this tendency to find a responsible body, organization, system outside, yes, our own feelings of responsibility is the same pattern we inherited somehow. So always we struggle with that. The second thing was common memory. That what it means, it may sound on the borderlands with clashing memories, different experiences, points of view, front lines, idealistic, to claim that you can have common memory, common historical textbook, which will agree on all the issues, from the past. Okay, I may agree that it is idealistic, but it doesn't mean to give up. We can be on the way to that possibility. How we can be on the way to give the room to other voices, to listen, to invite, to be in discussion, in dialogue, to create something like an agora in our small town, the white synagogue, which is in the very center of the town after vanished Jewish community, became like an agora in terms that all different groups can go there and meet and around the common table. It means in practice Lithuanians, Poles, rational believers, Belarusians, Roma, Gypsies, but also invited or returning, for visiting Jewish people as well. So it could be full of disagreements, this table. It could be full of, arguments, contradictory, okay, for the first year, for the second year, but if you do it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, maybe something will change. Maybe something will be open for common. Nina and Veronica will speak today, I think, about one of the examples how we try to build this common memory through the theater performance in the Chronicles, to put different stories in one narrative of the performance. But that is an example of how we understood that we can at least try to orientate ourselves of regaining common memory. And the third thing, which in my view, in our practice, is the most difficult one, much more than the critical memory, much more than common memory, is a good memory. Something in this tragic borderlands, at the bottom of heart, at the bottom of land, there is a spark of light. There is something good. The need to make a good gesture, the need to say sorry, the need to embrace the other. But how to do it? We don't have language, we don't have space, we don't have holidays, we don't have celebrations, to help with that. Everything what we have is to separate us, to focus on ourselves, our own suffering and our own rights. Yeah? How to dig up the good memory, how to find a legitimate language which is not only negative. And probably you as academics also know it from your practice. It's in the academic language, in the science, and it's absolutely right that you value critical language. Yes, critical research. But what about these fields of our life, of our psyche, of our body community, which are not under this critical view only, yes, negative. There's so many good things in our life, in our lands, in our memories, having no room or no way to be expressed. So this work on good memory became one of the crucial one to building, the language also. For example, the word pogranicze, borderland, is one of these words which we invented 30 years ago more. Not like making it from the scratch, we didn't create it, but it was in the tradition, but in the past somewhere. We, on the surface, what was the surface was, on dead lands from Polish tradition was the word kresy, edges, but kresy means the lands once belonging to commonwealths, Polish, Lithuania, commonwealths, but the kresy means in cultural, psychological terms, a nostalgia for something we lost, And for Lithuanians, Belarusians, Ukrainians, it didn't sound friendly, Kresy, It was together with this knowledge of assimilation, of dominating the other cultures, colonizing, and so on. So to replace one word with the another was very important. To have something in language that you can name these unnamed things, finally. But what I prepared for today is a little bit the one step ahead, so I will not come back to, I just make a short description of that. But what I want to talk about today is about the connection between memory and love, between mnemosyne and eros, and to build a reflection, somehow countering this. We have in our culture very strong tie between eros and thanatos, between love and death. But I see it rather as eros and mnemosyne, as a memory in a way of countering that opposition, and as a way to see the memory as the other in our life. The work with other was again something crucial for the work of the borderlander, for the bridge builders, but we did not have in the scope of otherness the memory, which I think is the point. So I will start with the quotation from Simone Weil, "From where will birds come to us who have contaminated and ravaged the entire globe? Only from the past, if we love it." These are Simone Weil's words from her book, The Need for Roots, La Enracinement. Her unfinished manuscript was published in 1949 by Albert Camus in the series Espoir, Hope. Weil sees uprooting as a state in which people don't have deep living ties with the environment. People who are uprooted lose their ties to the past. Awareness of who they are becomes linked with fear and uncertainty. Consequently, they are unable to occupy a full, meaningful place in the world. A decade later, a similar diagnosis of modernity would be made by Hannah Arendt in the human condition. In her understanding through the loss of domicile in the oikos, man is excluded from the circle of politikai, these who can actively shape reality, and without whom there is no real democracy. Alongside wars and dictates of money, Simone Weil sees one of the causes of uprooting, eradication, as the poisoning of education, which modernity reduces to the acquisition of a lucrative job or a prestigious position. In other words, the quest for social status has supplemented the search for knowledge and truth. It has also supplanted a culture of memory, that is, a cultivare of remembering that would be free of ignorance and lying. Simone Weil's words, marrying Eros to mnemosyny, were evoked, and these words were evoked by Czesław Miłosz, her first translator into Polish. He did so in a letter to us, to the borderland, on hearing that one of his family places, Krasnogróda, would be reborn. He interpreted the fact of initiating of the International Center for Dialogue in Polish-Lithuanian borderland as one of those teeny bricks laying foundations of resistance and overcoming the totalitarian and imperial legacy, established through uprooting, erasing memory, turning the conquered world into ruins, which in psychological terms also meant oblivion. A reborn place rises from the ruins, and gardeners take charge of the overgrowth. This is not all, however. Memory, too, carries the stigma of enslavement. It is liberating to release love in the work of remembering. A resurgent place needs to accommodate memory as the other, not assimilate it to our perception of what it should be. Death lives by killing the memory. A lobotomy is not an operation like removing cancer cells or cutting out a kidney. It is killing. Not remembering takes us out of the world. The erosion of a landscape due to war, ideology, or modernization, the demolition of a house, the plugging up of cemetery, a political directive to change the name of a place, uprooting, all they inflict the death of a place, although physically it still exists. Memory lives by putting death to death. We commune with memory, the living and the dead, across the boundaries of consciousness and physical existence. In a look, a handshake, a whisper toward another, the touch of a stone, the silence of strangeness, there is the warmth of memory. The emptiness after the destruction, the ruins and the stubble, the new establishments in space conceal the traces of the ancients. The material and corporeal passes into the metaphysical. Thanks to memory. The place becomes invisible. We return to it as one returns to oneself, through years, generations, epochs. The rememberer travels constantly from place to place. Memory is a returning. Place only remains reachable on the line of return. In this journey we need landmarks, So we create a topography of memory, a photograph, a pen drawing, a perpetual light, a prop of the theater of life, a petroglyph, a meaningless trinket, a diary, a memorial, a plaque, a fingerprint, a mother's pearl hidden at the bottom of a punch or a lump of native soil. Constellations of souvenirs arranged in albums or temples of the muses, from which we read the invisible. Memory runs forward. This is how we return, in a circle. This is why the museum display case, in which the artifacts pinned down languished, is memory's prison. Its way of life is to grasp the thread of action towards the future. The rememberer is concerned with what has to be done for tomorrow. Otherwise, memory gets lost, loses its credibility, starts to be hypocritical, has its mouth gagged. Rebellion, lessons learned from the past, innovation, transcending oneself, the journey beyond the horizon, moral choices, preparing for death, which is after all always ahead of us. In all this, memory leaves more our allegiance to memory. The crazy ones who pretend to build the future by not remembering. Their destiny is a showcase in which sooner or later the wreaths of the past will pin them down. Disdain memory gives birth to wraiths. What is important is not so much the commemoration of a place as the place from which one is remembered. One has to reach both. But in the first case, in the commemoration of the place, the road ends there. The road ends there. In the second, it is still running. From such a place, one sees fathers on the horizon, circles by not remembering and indifference to the past. Memory sees farther than sight allows, because it fills the place, frees the imagination, moves the heart. The place from which one remembers opens a perspective on the future. This is why museum is more a laboratory of tomorrow than a storehouse of the props of the past. Memory is never ours, of the people, of the French, of the Orthodox, of the socialist, of the survivors, of the lovers. Immersed in our identities and spiritual states, we remember, but it is not enough for us. Ourselves, our memories, our pain, our truths, not only oblige us to pass on and preserve our testimony, but tempt us to take possession of memory. We live in bondage to the notion of memory. It is not this that is threatening and illusory, that we remember subjectively, but that we want to take possession of memory. Memory is never ours. Memory runs past the code, sidestepping. She is different from our thinking, although she does not escape the slightest bit of our remembering. She is der Fremde, at once a foreigner and a stranger in our realm where we live and reign. The places we create for her and the shrines in which we kindle her light not only bring us closer to the foreign worlds where she is also at home, but are the links that bind our community. Therefore, communion. The guest for whom we leave an empty seat at the festive table, or a clean room, empty room in our house, the neighbor of a different nationality who reads a different history textbook or attends a different temple, the witness from other side of the front line, the foreign tribal chosen one whom love brings into our midst, into our houses, the revisitor of the place where they or their ancestors once lived, the non-native by chance, all of them are messengers of memory. Without them, communion is not fulfilled. We may remember differently from them, but we cannot exclude them from the circle of communion, for then it is we who become the exiles of memory. To commune with memory means to transcend one's own remembering. The rememberer moves toward the bridge constantly. He or she leaves his shore, ventures into the unknown, follows an inner voice that argues with the necessity of life, common sense, the raison d'être, to meet her, the eternal foreigner, living on the bridge. A man reaches the bridge and walks across it, tears it down or rebuilds it, but he never lives on it. He is only there as a guest, a passerby, and a neighbor. Where human life cannot take root, death does not rule. Death's stick hits the stone of the bridge. Mnemosyne emerged from the silence disturbed by Eris, whose daughter Lethe was. So the Mnemosyne emerged from the silence disturbed by Eris, disagreement, yes, conflict, whose daughter Lethe, forgetfulness, was. There would be no memory were it not for discord and forgetfulness. Mnemosyne gave birth to the Muses in order to expand man's knowledge and deepen his soul, so that he could bind what was separated and find harmony in chaos. Memory doesn't overcome conflicts or establish final solutions. It only frees up conversation and teaches the art of transcending, within which each of the Muses has its own workshop. The plug of memory, suspended in the soul of every human being from birth, assigns him or her to the guild of bridge builders. Our life is a sequence of broken and reborn ties. We remember, therefore we are. In every bridge we build, memory lives. That is why a bridge cannot be torn down. It can only, as they say in Mostar, in Bosnia, be killed. In the language, bridge is not a sink material, but it's a living existence. Yeah? So, forgetfulness reigns on a separate shore among its own. The loyalty of the locals transform remembering into collusion. Then memory seduces, defeats, enslaved in places of celebration of the past. The collusion is threatened by the foreigner and the alien tribesman, but it is not in their power to tame the forgetting. This can only be done by the locals, for it is the inner breaking that frees memory. From overcoming the conspiracy of their own, a rememberer is born, always with the stigma of a deserter. Forget me. In Polish you would say, zapomnij mi to. make my memory change, forget me. This is how forgiveness is asked for in the Slavic languages. Transcending one's own remembering heals wounds, and deep down is a silent, not always released confession of love. In forgiveness, there is no resignation or need to kill forgetting. There is a call to action, only possible on the bridge of remembrance. A path paved with stones thrown by Eris and Lete leads to it, to the very end. To go this way, to overcome oneself in this way, is only possible for a loving person. Love of a neighbor is born of an attitude towards the question, will you be able to remember me not? In Hesiod's Theogony, Mnemosyne comes into the world as a calamity of forgetfulness and release from care. Such memory is capable of being released only by love. For centuries, the remembering of Europeans has conveyed the news of the rapprochement between Eros and Thanatos, and in the depths of our psyche, we have found the ties that bind the libido to the destrudo. It took the cataclysm of disasters and trauma of annihilation for us, reaching the place from which Europe is remembered, to perceive the invisible nuptials of Eros and Mnemosyne, which testify that tomorrow is possible. Oh, thank you for your attention. There are 2 mics, so if you have any questions or reflections to share.
Czyżewski is working for 30 years with all these topics, and in Lithuania we know him very well. He's a kind of hero and a very, very famous person, and he has got a lot of Lithuanian books in this building, and it always makes impression for my Lithuanian colleagues who come in here and see so many books in a Polish place. It's something extraordinary, because we in Lithuania, we know that Poles are bad people in general. And suddenly, you know, yes, they are making translations of Lithuanian poetry. They are reading here in Polish, and Lithuanians who are coming with me here, and they are impressed by these names of Lithuanian poets that they do not know themselves in Lithuania. And here they are translated into Polish and discussed and so on. So it's very impressive what is being done here. And it's real phenomena, it's regional phenomena. It's important not only for Poland, but also for Lithuania, for Belarus, for Jewish legacy and so on. But my question is about the future. Memories about the future. Yeah, are you optimistic about the future?
Thank you for this question around good memory and good. It's even harder to have good feelings about the future. I remember Ritis once Thomas Venclova writing about Czesław Miłosz, naming him as a man of the word yes. Człowiek słowa tak. So although Miłosz went through all this hell of 20th century, he was a person challenging himself as a poet, as a writer, that you have right to write when only you have a good emotion. You know, the belief in the future. So we are always struggling for having it. And the time is not easy for all of us. And but still we have, my belief and my optimism for the future is that still at least something is in our hands. And till we have it, you know, and of course we can see, because there is a visible improvement of Polish-Lithuanian relationships, and many interprets it as an influence of the threat from Moscow. Yes, so if the danger comes, you know, from outside, so we tend to be closer to each other. But the question for us again is that if it is not that authentic, if it is not based on eros, yeah, then sooner or later it will work against us. So even in that cases, you know, having these new fears from the East, we should, or how we can build our good relationships, you know, in something positive. That's one of the answers for your question to me. And another optimistic thing, also it's in the heart of the tragedy of Ukraine, is that there's the first time in my life that the victory, I mean overcoming of evil, is at stake of this war. The peremocha, is how they call it in Ukraine. Where we were engaged in former Yugoslav wars or other wars in Caucasus, there was never the word victory used. You know, there was always this kind of conflicts that you believe that it will end up with a routine peacemaking, which will be on for a moment, you know, for short term, and with the price of this or others, you know, and that's how it works in the world. And there is no alternative to that. Yes, when you cope with these big empires, with Goliaths, you know, you should understand that there is no way for being victorious. Maybe in the other world. So we may have rights, we can be humanist, you know, we can be anti-war people, but the victory will not belong to us. And that was, I think, for me personally, for my generation, a constant problem. And suddenly we are in the position that the victory is at stake. We don't know how it will end, yes, but at least you reach the point that there is no way to continue with these rotten compromises, and it takes price, of course, and so.
Okay, to my understanding, you started with the relationship between love and death. And then you, of course, brought memory into it, right? Love, memory, and death. And then you elaborated quite on how you own this territory. And then you said that you need to develop a kind of a credible memory, and you need to confess if there is some kind of guilt to be the part of that wider community. And then you also said that when you develop the love for certain memory or area, then there's no concept of otherness. So I don't understand this whole context. I mean, once you talk about memory, love, death, and then there's no concept of others. So can memory be that inclusive?
You see, thank you for this question. I think that's when you are a parent, the father or the mother, and you love your children, the danger for situation would be is that you will expect them to be as you like. But being fully lover, you will make them the freedom of being themselves, you know, and being truthful to themselves. That's how you may express the love. And the same, I think, happens with the community and with memory. Yeah, that's how I understand taking in possession, you know, the memory, or taking in possession our children or our people in community. Yes, that we take them in possession, it means that they should be like we want and imagine them. But this is not about the love. And so that's why I think that only love can break it down, you know, and open it to something more truthful and justful. Of course, the love is a strong word, yes, and sometimes you feel that in our holy scripts, you know, in our philosophers, you know, you suddenly find these phrases: "Love your neighbors," you know. Why is so you know, far-reaching? Why not just a friendship or rational relationships? You know, why we use these words "love" for these certain things? You know, like a neighbor could be, you know, your enemy in the war, and so on and so on, and you suddenly read "love him or her." Yeah, but more and more I work on these painful borderlands. I see that without it, you know, there is no way to go into that. But it means, in that terms, love means maybe we are too orthodox and too absolute with that. It's that when you hear it, you suddenly see, oh, it is completely illusory. It is out of, you know, reality. But in fact, that's how it works among the people, really, on the level, you know, of local community. That it somehow escapes these scientific categories, you know, and my lesson is that we are crazy enough as people that the love can be crazy, you know, and can free us, you know, completely of something what we will see as irrational before and impossible. Yes.
Where do you bring the death in then? I mean, love is okay. But what is the connection between love and death? Then why did you bring death in? Or where did you bring that in from?
Again, it's really interesting, but that there is something I see as a poison connection between libido and destrudo. So that to being yourself, it counts the destruction or the death of the others. You know, that it is related, you know, as necessity. So I see as a life necessity, you know, that, but also in practical terms, that memories and mnemosyne can break this tie, you know, which is so strong in our culture, the love and the death. Yes, the end of love is always death. Yes, and it will go to the death, and it will take you to the death. You know, it will cost you the death. But memory makes something different with that. When you work with her in a justful way, that maybe there is a way out of this necessity, which is like the burden we have in life. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Is this on? Good. Thanks, Krzysztof, for that fascinating, thought-provoking talk. Just to kind of maybe follow on from what Dr. Yunus was saying there. You talked about that idea of memory not being able to exist without the other, which immediately made me sort of go back to perhaps the beginnings of modern memory studies, the work of Maurice Albach's in the first half of the 20th century, where he was talking about the collective, the group memory, and saying, you know, there is no individual memory without the group to support our memory of our own lives. You know, we would not have a memory of ourselves. You seem to be kind of pushing that further and saying that there is no group memory without the other, which sort of goes beyond the pattern of perhaps what I'm going to just call antagonistic or nationalistic memory, which is very inward-looking. It's a very interesting idea, and from your work that you do here, I'd be interested to hear something about the pragmatics of that, how it is you persuade communities that actually, to sustain their own collective memory, they need to let the other in.
Thank you, David, for this. My first answer will be, again, coming back to the language. We have a very strange word in Polish, obcowanie, which means being together, but obcy means stranger. So from one side, obcowanie is a community, but at the core of the community is the other. So in other words, there is no community with the other. It's the same about the memory. If community is making if memory is building community, then she is as the other, and she makes us. There is a very, I was mentioning just shortly in my paper, but there is a whole tradition which fascinates me in the architecture, especially, you know, traditional architecture. You build a house. Yes, you have many members of your family. Usually these houses are of poor families, so many children sleeping in 2-3 in one bed even. But always there is an empty room in the house. So they call it czysta izba, the clean room. Why is so? And it's not only about, you know, that you want to have guests and you know that a family member will come once and you... No, it's this belief that there is no house without empty room. Yeah, so there is, so what means the empty room? Unpossessed. Yeah, that there should be the place in your community, in your house, which is unpossessed, because only in that way, the full memory, the full other, or you may call it even transcendence, will appear in your life. So that's also something what I, for example, experienced in Bhutan. They have this construction of dzong, you know, this constellation of buildings with administration, housing, monastery, academy, all together. But always with this constellation, there is an empty house built and not possessed by anybody. Why? This belief that maybe, you know, when you possessed everything, there will be no room for this what you would expect to encounter. Yeah, so you always care about not possessing everything. Another example, we have something what we call the mystery of the bridge, which is once a year, a performance we organize August 22nd. But when we did for the first time, and we believed at the beginning that it will be just one time, the people, our villagers from here came to us and said, put this day into the calendar. We want to have a day of a bridge in our calendar. Again, it was the empty room in the calendar, because there is no possessor of the bridge. All, the calendar is fulfilled with our holidays, ours, Lithuanians, Catholics, others, all look, that's how our life goes on. And they really wanted to have a bridge day holiday, which there is no owner of that. Yeah, that's how the way of the feeling about these things goes on. Yes. And of course, it is hidden. When you will ask or make an enquete with them, it will be very hard to dig it up. Yes, you will easily find all the prejudices, fears, and nationalistic attitudes. Yes, but there is another way to go around and to touch some unexpressed, sometimes invisible things. Even among people, you will say, xenophobes or nationalists, Of course, it is there also, yes, but parallelly, there are things of such other words, and beliefs, and that's the role of the positive, good memories, to make it a living. So when in first I will say, there is no community with the other, you would say, oh, this intellectual idealist, utopias, yes? Believing in such things which do not really exist. But when you are closer to the people, closer to the communities, to what they experience and how they see the world, you will find these, crumbs of a different views, and the question is what we can do with that, yes, also. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my question goes back. Thank you for a very interesting speech, first of all. But my question is not about the main speech, but was about your comment on victory in terms. Okay, before asking the question, I want to bring one story back. From years ago, I was in the US and there was this lecture, and the lecturer was speaking about some realities in the US and in the West, and then somebody asked a question, and he commented saying that, I'm speaking about the real world, I'm not speaking about the third world. So your reference to Balkan wars or Caucasus wars as of something small happening there between, I don't know, small people, it's like a very distanced view and very positioned, which is okay, because depending on where you are positioned, your view on things could be different. I just wanted you to elaborate more on that. What you meant by saying that victory became real when it was about, I mean, you started using the word victory when it referred to Ukraine-Russia war, and you would never use it with respect to these things happening somewhere in distance from your position or somewhere happening, I don't know, between aborigines or whatever. It's just, sorry for commenting on that emotionally. It's because this is a very common perception from the distance when looking at our part of the world. Thank you.
Yes. I was giving, recalling this Yugoslavia or Caucasus because I was there during the war. So I was with Tadeusz Mazowiecki, for the whole Yugoslav war, traveling there. And he was, as you remember, the representative of UN for former Yugoslavia crimes. Yes, and I worked with them, and I was, during the Abkhazian war in Georgia and so on. So I was in Aceh, in Indonesia. But that doesn't mean that I'm insider, of course, and you are absolutely right that, it's a distant position. But how I understand this, that the word victory, or even in Poland we have zwycięstwo, yes, one act of something which doesn't happen, of course. Peremocha is more like overcoming, and even more, which is more interesting for me, mochti, it means can. We can. Peremochti means we can more. And the situation I'm referring is that we always base things on what we can. Be realistic. But be realistic meant a suffering for so many people in this world. Because it was always, we cannot more. Yeah, that was the Tina, yeah, no alternative. So the way is not to, and that's how business is first, prevails on responsibility, yeah? So the war started in Donbass, in Crimea in 2015, but they were, the West, France, Germany, they still were selling the weapons till the moment of this full-scale war. That was how they understand what we can. Yeah. So we can more means that we are somehow becoming rebels against this consensus. And of course, in each case, it is different. Yes, and I'm consciously connected it with responsibility. Yes, because it could be also something going out of control and, bring much more suffering than good. But from other side, there is this inner cry, scream, enough of what we can. Yes, really, to find ourselves in the position that we can more. That's the only thing can change this world is we can more. And it means that we are becoming better than we are. I remember, for example, the Poles, building the solidarity movement, which is like far away from today. So we are not like that. But we became more than we were at that moment. And we changed our history. For that sudden moment, we became better than we are. And it happened. Yes, and so this is about our life, that sometimes we know what we are. We all know about our weaknesses, our fears, and so on. But sometimes the moments comes when we can cross it. Yeah.
I wonder if you're just being a little too romantic about this, because we can do more after having experienced all these recent, few 2-3 decades in the neighborhood, not really that far. Yugoslavia is in the neighborhood of Poland, and but it wasn't that sentiment. And maybe the current situation with Ukraine is more because that's really the war between US and Russia. And Ukraine is stuck in the middle. And so there's this bigger effect, there are bigger players involved that they want the victory. And by they, really US. And so that somehow then, trickled into EU first, Europe, and then everybody there, and it's inspiring this kind of notion that and of course we should do more, but we should have done more for Bosnia and Kosovo. Still, Kosovo is happening right now, parallel, after many years and then a break, and there's no victory there in sight that could be said or accounted for. So I don't know, I think it seems like this is, I'm curious if that's just the case sort of like in Poland, because it's such a, it's right there on the line and you're receiving a lot of obviously refugees, and it's much more intense than a little bit further away. So if that's the sentiment truly around the country, or if this is just your personal perspective.
From one point, you see, I'm again coming to this danger I'm opposing all my life, that something is in the hands of Russia and America, and we are just small, pins, in hands of the bigger. So we are not responsible, it's It's beyond. Yeah, I'm very much against it. Yeah, it's all what I'm defending is about the David power facing the Goliath. So it doesn't mean that, struggling with this big empire power, it could be the state, it could be media, it could be evil. It's huge. And the belief that only another big Goliath can defeat, it's a real danger. Then it means that we are in hands of Goliath. If we will lose the trust and believe in the David power. What does it mean this meeting here? Few people, 20, 30. No TV here, no cameras. What does it mean? Can we change something? Can we change with this small Borderland Foundation anything? You are so small.
I'm from Pakistan, a playwright. I'm not in a position to make a contribution in the context of some horrifying events which have taken place in this part of the world. But in our part of the world also, there is no dearth of such horror stories. But I just wanted to, maybe if you allow me to comment in a more, you say, a different perspective. We're talking about love, death, and good memories of future. So there is one way of looking at it in our Sufi tradition, which is something remarkable and has really done wonders in very difficult times. There, the Sufi's love for God or for beloved, it culminates in death. And the death is celebrated. So when a great Sufi dies, it's called Urs, wedding, reunion. So death is a part of that process of love. And if you apply it on more worldly situations, there also love for other is actually embracing the other is something which has healed so many wounds in India or in the region of South Asia. And the Sufis were the only place where even today, or even in most difficult times, where people from all religions, all castes, all classes would come and they will be accepted not only by the Sufis but also by others who, when they go out of that domain, they carry on sometimes with their differentiation or with their prejudices or even violence. So that is one approach where you don't see other as other, and you don't see yourself as self only. So when talking of the memories, the common memories and the critical memory, so I was wondering, the memory of the other, actually, I mean, there is in the other a part of you also. There are so many shared memories, and we normally only go for things which differentiate us. So if we see the self in the other, and if you see the other in you, then maybe you can create, if that is the right word, new memories, or new future. So it's love is a starting point, but then you have to be skillfully and consciously creating new memories where you gather the good memories or the loved emotions or heritage of the other. Like I'm speaking in the context of Muslims and Hindus or Sikhs in India and Pakistan. where we discovered that there is, at one point in 1947, they committed massacres or ethnocide or genocide. But still, now it's only like 75 years. And those communities which were killing each other like something which was unique in its monstrous or evilness, they are at the moment, this is my experience as a performer, that they are loving and embracing and sharing the good memories which had been buried under this hatred. So this conscious creation, starting from love, but not ending with love, but conscious creation of new memories. Do you think this is what we are trying to understand today?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing Sufi tradition, which is important for borderlanders, I believe. When I defended the memory as the other, it means, because I absolutely agree what you said, that it is part of us. And so you may say in that terms it's not the other because it's part of us. But what I try to do is to defend this other, this memory or this inner voice as the other one. So in not being possessed by our ego, by our I, yes, and selves, that even inside us, there is a second voice, there is an inner voice, but the other one goes very often in contradiction to what we would like to believe in and to our comfort, So it becomes the other in terms that works against our comfort, against our easy assimilations and adaptations. That's how I mean, that, and only I believe that only love can defend it, in fact, as the other, not claiming that it will change or we will be make much more easy and so on. That's how love operates. We are in love because we respect the difference between us. And we are in love because we have full respect and love to somebody else who is as she is, yes, not as we want to have. That's in that terms I was trying to explain that, and it brings us to this point. Without love, it's hard to imagine it, hard to make it in practice. Yes, that's why this big word, comes to something what is very real and nearby us. Yes, and inside us, even that without because love is something what over crossing all our limits in a way, yes, that's something what brings you to another bank, to brings you elsewhere where you are, and that's how this is so practical also, so close to us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm also from Pakistan, and I am an interdisciplinary artist. My question, I also, missed the part of lecture. Maybe you touched that part, but yeah. Memory is very nostalgic and a very individual expression. And I also belong to that generation after migration, after this event of partition 1947 we had, being a Pakistani. I grew up with migration stories. We used to live on the one side of border, but we actually live in that nostalgic world on the other side where we can never ever access and touch that part of world that belongs to us, definitely in that story. So my question about narratives, because when it comes to an individual narrative of an event in terms of memory or memory of places. It's very nostalgic, full of love, full of experiences. But when it comes to a collective memory and collective narratives, even Sir Nadeem gave an example of this Sufi. It is also like a kind of artistic tool to connect to community. So it's also a kind of narrative, and always like in communities and in countries, they use this art and religion as a tool. So when it comes to a collective narrative, it's also a kind of biasness towards that collective memory, how you position it and how you narrate it. Like there is a lot of difference, but I would like to hear from you with that experience of Kosovo. I also know Kosovo from this humor as a resistance background. So how you position, because there is also in Donadu theater, they did this position of theater as a humor. They use humor as a resistance, and theater performing arts as a community to take their voice as a community. So yeah, I would love to hear.
Concerning Kosovo, because I also worked in Kosovo, it was, sometimes the way to build a bridge is to emancipate yourself on your bank, in one moment to be separated, not to be imposed to be together from external will, and that's a step toward, in the future, building something like a bridge. Yes, when you impose or have any rotten piece, then it will end up like today we see, yes, in Kosovo. But there is something very crucial in your question, I think, coming back to this romanticism, to these utopian visions we have. I'm aware about that, yes, and my recipe not to fly to the heaven, from reality with this was, because I remember the period in my life as an artist, we called it a kind of alternative culture, counterculture in the 70s and 80s. Here we had a strong theater movement, alternative theater movement in Poland, in communist Poland, but there was, all this counterculture movement in the West. And our belief at that time was that if you have your dreams, if you have your utopias, ideas, you should go out of society to the refuge, to create a separate, alienated commune, to realize your ideas. That was the way of counterculture. There is no way to do it in the society. So you build, you go out, outside, and you create asylums, somewhere in a special spaces. My experience from that time is bad, and I think it was one of the founding feelings we as a Borderland team members had at the end of 80s, because these close ideal communities, communes, hippie communes and other, ended up as a small regimes with gurus, with violence and everything around that. Very hardly you will find a good example of something what ended up in, and till today it exists as a living utopia. So our answer to that was countering it. You have your ideas, you have your beliefs, go to the people, go to the community, and live with them. Not for a moment, not for a project, but for the life. And then you try everything what you believe on a real ground, and especially when you have this borderland concept, nothing is easy. And then you somehow, and the surprise is maybe that they give you a lot of power, to be more courageous than you even thought in. and they don't need you as much as, you know, supporter of the biases, yes, but rather as a help of breaking them down or, you know, making some change. Of course, it's different, yes, and sometimes there are different emotions about this kind of work we are doing. Sometimes you have many negative or fears, you know, but the main thing is that you ask, okay, the bridge is broken, but you're still there. You are not leaving. And we have a next day, a next year. And you stay. Because from the beginning, they believe that we as artists coming here, very soon we will disappear. That was the belief, yes? That's how artists are doing. And especially when they are becoming successful. If you are successful, you will not stay in a small town. Yeah, the world is waiting for you. Yes, and so on. So they suddenly started to think, oh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If there's no other question, last question.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I think I'm taking too much of your time, but this last question. So, what I understood from your talk and your answers to different questions, love means you accept others, but no otherness. I mean, you say, okay, others, okay, but there's no concept of otherness, right? You don't push them. Okay, do we find this kind of a time in the history, a memory of this type, or maybe at a local level? I'm not talking about a kind of a big, mega, universal sort of memory. Do you find a time in the history where we can relate to it, our memory of that particular time where there was this love, concept of love without any otherness?
I wouldn't say that there was a certain moment in the history, a definitive one, that, you know, this utopia would be realized, that we are all the time struggling and on the way. So that's how it also it works with our craft as a bridge builders. You never can say that the bridge is built. I can't use past simple for our work. You understand that it is always in the process, and, you know, dynamic things happens. And of course, many negative things happens, which can prove our disillusion to that. But still, we are here. As we are. How it happened? Yes, that these destructive powers didn't erase the whole globe, you know, and the Hitler is not reigning anymore. Yes, although he was as an emanatory of this power, yes. And paradoxically, you see, when I'm using this concept of otherness, in our European tradition, there was something what we called philosophy of dialogue. We had philosophers like, mostly they were born here, somewhere like Emanuel Levinas was born near Kaunas. Yes, Martin Buber was born in Vienna, but he raised up in Lviv in today's Ukraine. So, and they developed this concept of philosophy of dialogue, putting at the center you, the other, as a core thing during the fascist time, where Nazis started to rule Germany. So you may say they were completely cut off the reality. Yes, then there were, you know, you have the Nazis coming to the power, you know, in this 1933, and Buber is publishing You and I, his famous manifesto of this otherness. But sometimes that's how it happens, you know, that we have this courage and these new visions because of very difficult circumstances. And the way to overcome it is to build something which is much bigger than we are in that moment. Sometimes the most beautiful bridges, I think you know it also from Iran, for Pakistan, are built on a very difficult river's bank. You know, when it makes you difficult to join, you need a special craft, a special art, most beautiful in the world. I was mentioning Mostar Bridge, you know, here, but it is under the UNESCO protection now as a World Heritage. Very beautiful bridge, but the banks are so difficult, sharp, you know, with very conflicted communities, you know, from both sides and so on. So you are as an architect coming there, and you know that your craft should lift up, you know, to the and the same happens with you go to the local community, yes, and an artist, and you may believe that you should diminish your ambitions as artists because they are local people, yes. But suddenly you go to these local people, and their experiences, their traumas, their problems are lifting you up so highly that you suddenly believe that you should do very ambitious art, very ambitious science research to cope with that. Yes, so it's not like you go to the people and you just go down. Yes, with all your dreams and no, they lift you up. Again, also when you will make an enquete asking what you do want in culture and artists, probably they will sign and say, you know, very simple, you know, festivities and so on. But that's not what they is at the bottom of their soul, yes? They need partners to cope with something very tragic inside. And then as a researcher, as an artist, as any person, you should face this, yes? Take this challenge. Okay, we will continue.